So I'm going to start out by reading AJ's devotional. It's probably almost word for word what my message is, even though all I did was tell him what my message was about. And the title of my message is How Big is the God We Serve? So the title of his devotional is We Serve a Bigger God Than We Remember. Sometimes our biggest problem isn't that God is too small, it's that our memory is. We remember the size of the problem, but forget the size of our God. We look at the diagnosis, the debt, the broken relationship, the temptation, the court date, the past, or the uncertainty of tomorrow, and suddenly the problem becomes bigger in our minds than the God who created everything. But think about who we serve. He spoke light into darkness. He parted the Red Sea. He brought water from a rock. He shut the mouths of lions. He took 5 loaves and 2 fish and fed thousands. He called Lazarus out of the grave. And when death thought it had won, Jesus walked out of the tomb. That's our God. Yet sometimes we wake up and act like today's problem is the first thing he has ever faced. Maybe you don't need a smaller problem today. Maybe you need a bigger remembrance of God. David didn't defeat Goliath because Goliath was small. David defeated him because he remembered who was standing behind him. 1 Samuel 17:47 says, "The battle is the Lord's." Whatever you're facing today, don't measure your future by the size of your circumstances. Measure your circumstances by the greatness of your God. Your situation may be impossible for you, but you don't serve a God limited to what you can do. You serve the God who specializes in impossible things. So before you panic, remember what he has already brought you through. Remember the prayers he has answered. Remember the doors he's opened. Remember the times you thought you wouldn't make it and somehow you're still here. The same God who carried you then has not become weaker now. Behold, I am the Lord, the God of all flesh. Is there anything too hard for me? That's from Jeremiah 32, verse 27. Prayer for the day. Father, forgive me for making my problems bigger than you. Remind me today of just how great you are. When fear tells me that my situation is impossible, help me remember that nothing is too hard for you. Strengthen my faith and teach me to trust the God who has never stopped being God. In Jesus' name, amen. So I think God actually started to try and give me this message like before I did my last message, so like over a month ago. But all I had was a title, and it was saved on my computer. So whenever last week I was like, okay, what are we talking about this week, God? And that was the first one I looked at, and I'm like, okay, let's start there. So I've been working on this message since last week, and the way that God brought it up to me like a month ago was I was sitting here listening to music, I think during a meeting, or I think it was a meeting, and God told me that you forgot just how big of a God that I am, because I was looking at all the circumstances and, worrying about everything that was going on, and it got me thinking that I definitely have. Our small minds really can't comprehend just how big that God is. I've got several examples from the Bible here. The Bible is filled with accounts that reveal the staggering scale, power, and authority of God. From commanding the elements to mocking the laws of physics, these stories demonstrate that no problem is too massive, no empire too powerful, and no human limitation is too great for him. I listed just 5 examples. The first one was, obviously, the creation of the whole universe. I was going to read a little bit of it. Well, originally I was going to read all of it, and then I looked at it and was like, that's too long. I'll just read a couple lines. So from Genesis 1, I'm going to get there real quick. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and empty, and darkness covered the deep waters. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day and the darkness night. And I'm skipping a couple, and then I just want to read one more. And then an evening passed and morning came, making the second day. Then God said, "Let the waters beneath the sky flow together into one place, so dry ground may appear." And that's what happened. So I was just reading more than one because every single day on here, if you keep reading through Genesis, every single day God says, and God just says, let there be this, let there be that. So I just thought it just shows how powerful he is, that he doesn't even have to use any hard labor tools like we do, anything. He just simply speaks it into existence. And that's just really shows how powerful he is. So the second example I had was the parting of the Red Sea. That's in Exodus 14. I'll just have a brief description. I'm not going to read all that. But the Israelites found themselves pinned between the incoming Egyptians and all their chariots and all their soldiers and the sea. And now they're stuck there. And God instructs Moses to lift his staff and stretch his hand over the water. And then Moses does what God told him to do, and a powerful wind, powerful enough to part the sea and make dry land in the middle so they can walk through it. There's a wind that powerful. So the Israelites start to walk through, and they walk, I believe it said when I was looking, all night. And then as soon as they cross, it's morning and there's light. And as soon as it's morning, God lets all the waves crash back down on all the chariots and all the Egyptians that were coming, and he kills them all and sweeps them all away. And I thought the lesson in that was that there's no problem too big for God to fix. And if he can control, the wind, the water, and he can part the sea, there's not any problem that we have here today, I don't think, that he can't fix. And the next one I have was the fall of Jericho, which is in Joshua. So God promised the region of Canaan to the Israelites after they left Egypt. Jericho stood directly in their path as a heavy fortified barrier with high walls. The local leaders closed and guarded the city tightly out of fear of incoming Israelite migration. God gave Joshua the explicit instructions to march around the city rather than launch a conventional military. Basically, instead of going to battle, he just tells them, just march around the city. So that's what they do. He tells Joshua to march the army and priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant around Jericho. For 6 days, the people walked in silence, once a day, while the ram horns blew. On the 7th day, they circled the city 7 times. On the final signal, the priest gave a long blast. The people shouted a great shout, and the walls fell down completely so the army could charge straight in. I think the victory, or the lesson there, was that victory over giant life obstacles comes through trusting God's power and obeying his instructions rather than relying on our own strength. Yeah. So victory over giant life obstacles comes through trusting God's power and obeying his instructions rather than relying on our own strength. So he told Joshua, Joshua trusted him enough, because if God told us to go take over a city by just marching around it, I might question him a little bit, honestly. You just want me to walk around it and chant and I'm going to win this battle? I don't get that. But Joshua knew that God was powerful, and he obeyed what he told him to do, and God brought him through it. So I feel like that was the lesson in that. And another example in the Bible, there's obviously a lot of examples in the Bible. I just listed 5. But the feeding of the 5,000, and I did a little research on that because it said that it was the only miracle that was recorded in all 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So I was like, is that true? And I researched it, and that's what it said. That's the only miracle that's recorded in all of the Gospels. But Jesus and his disciples withdrew by a boat to a remote area near Bethsaida to rest, but a massive crowd followed them on foot. Jesus, moved by compassion, spent the day teaching the people and healing the sick. As the evening came, the crowd got hungry, and they're in the middle of nowhere. They're far away from anything. The disciples are like, God, it's getting dark. You need to tell these people to go into the city and find some food. And God's like, no, tell them to sit on the ground. And there was a boy who offered, 5 barley loaves of bread and 2 small fish was offered by a boy in the crowd. So Jesus ordered them to sit down on the grass and organize groups He took the bread and fish, looked up to heaven, and gave thanks, broke the food, and handed it to the disciples to distribute. The food miraculously multiplied as it was passed around. All the people ate until they were completely satisfied. Afterward, the disciples gathered 12 baskets of leftover pieces to make sure nothing was wasted. So he fed 5,000 people with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And there was leftovers, which AJ did a whole message on leftovers. Apparently we're leftovers. Yeah, it was. So I feel like the lesson there was that God can use small, humble offerings to provide for huge needs. So even, if we're passing the basket around on Sunday and, we don't have much to give, but he can multiply it and make it whatever it's needed for. The 5th example I have was when God called Lazarus out of the grave. That's in John 11:38 through 44. So Lazarus, he falls sick and he dies. But before he died, Mary and Martha had come to Jesus, and they're like, hey, can you come please pray for Lazarus? And Jesus loved Lazarus. He was a good friend of his. And Jesus, he was finishing up something. I don't remember what. I'm paraphrasing. And he's like, okay, I'll come when I'm done with this. But when Mary and Martha go back, Lazarus dies, and, they're all upset because they think Jesus has failed. He hasn't come, and Lazarus is dead. This is the end. Yeah, Larry?
No, I'm just thinking
Oh.
what you just said. They thought Jesus had failed.
Yeah. They did. But Jesus shows up, and he sees that Lazarus is in the tomb, and he, I think that the shortest verse in the entire Bible was that Jesus wept. Jesus wept because he loved Lazarus, and he felt grief for that, but he knew that he could bring him back to life. So he tells all the I lost my spot. He tells the bystanders to remove the stone and thanks God, and tells Lazarus to come out of the grave. Lazarus emerges from the tomb wearing all his burial wrappings still, and Jesus asks the people to set him free from all his clothes. I think the story of Lazarus teaches us that just because we don't see it, God's time is always on time. Martha and Mary believed that God was too late because Lazarus had already died. She asked him to come heal Lazarus, and when he didn't show up, she believed he failed and that there was no hope anymore. But the story of Lazarus teaches us that divine delays are not denials. God can restore hopeless situations even when we don't see how there could be a way. So God told me that I'd forgot how big of a God he was. So I've actually started a journal now, thankfully. It's just it's an online one. It's free if anybody else is interested. It's called Penzu. And that way I can go back and read my journal or my testimonies or my messages whenever I do start to forget what all God's done in my life. So, but when he told me that, it got me thinking, okay, let me think back to some of the things that God's done for me so I can just be reminded. And so I named a few of those here. And I know that God, he's still working miracles today. That's why our testimonies are so important, because everybody in this room has testimonies of things that God's done for them. And just because they're not written in the Bible doesn't mean that they're not going to help lift others up. We just have to share it. I don't know, I was just thinking about that. How many people around the world are following God? If they all wrote their stories down and we made a book, how big of a book would it be? It would be huge. That would be cool, though. God needs to come out with Bible number 2. Just kidding. Yeah. So I just named a few, but obviously the most obvious ones are that, God saved me from addiction, alcoholism, and pretty much just a hopeless mess. That those aren't supposed to be in there. But the ones I thought back to were, the first one was when I had a warrant for my arrest while I was 2 years sober. So about 2 years ago, I was working from home, and AJ messaged me and told me that we had a huge problem. He told me that he was bored, and he gets on mycase.gov and he just looks up people's names to see who's in trouble or whatever. I don't know. And he was looking me up, and when he got on there, he saw that I had a warrant for my arrest. I had gotten a DUI 2 years before that during COVID, whenever I was, heavy into drinking and all that. And it was during COVID, so they didn't really have court. I went into the courthouse. I signed a plea deal. I gave it to the public defender, and they told me I didn't have to come back. I was going to be on probation and all this. So I thought everything was good. And I come to find out later that public defender never turned the signed plea deal in. So they scheduled another court date. And I had moved twice since then, so I never got any notices of this court date. And I didn't tell the courthouse because I didn't think I needed to. I didn't have anything going on with them anymore. So I never knew about it, and I missed it. So I had a warrant for my arrest. Just so everybody knows, AJ wanted me to turn me in that day instead of trying to, for him, I guess, some peace and quiet. So at that time, I worked from home. So until I could, get in touch with, figure out who the new public defender was I needed to talk to and get everything, a new court date settled, I would barely leave the house. I was terrified to. I'm like, they're going to pull me over and take me to jail, and let's just figure out what we can do first before it gets to that point. I did not want to be 2 years sober and have to go sit in jail with a bunch of people that weren't. I mean, I would have done it. I probably would have talked about Jesus and got beat up or something. But I didn't really want to do that. So during that time, though, I had to take Natalia to school one day, and I even swapped cars with AJ. I made him swap me cars. I was like, if they run my license plate, they're going to pull me over. And would you believe that day I happened to get pulled over? I know a lot of you have heard this story, but of all days, I got pulled over that day on my way home after I'd been running around all day getting groceries. And I had Natalia in the car with me because I just picked her up from school. So I started, I'm freaking out thinking that my daughter's about to watch me go to jail. They don't know anything about this warrant. I haven't told them because I'm trying to, get it all situated and figured out. But somehow that day, God completely shielded that police officer's eyes, and he didn't even see that I had a warrant for my arrest, and he let me go. And I think they were looking for somebody with a similar car or something, but. So I couldn't believe it. I'm sitting there shaking, and my daughter's like, "What's wrong with you, Mom? Why are you acting this way?" And I'm like, "Can't talk about it right now." Can't talk about it right now. And I'm like, "Oh gosh." And I'm like, "Message AJ." Message AJ. Tell him I got pulled over. He'll know what it means. Because I'm like, he's gonna know. He better come get you because I'm about to go to jail, and they're gonna try to take you somewhere. I don't know. But long story short, I did end up getting a new court date. They dropped my charges from the DUI to reckless driving, and I had already lost my license for 6 months. But for reckless driving, you don't lose your license, I don't think. So they actually even apologized to me for taking my license for 6 months. So in the beginning, I couldn't see the full picture of how everything was actually going to work in my favor. All I knew is that I was completely freaking out and that, everything was going wrong. Here I was 2 years sober, facing consequences from years before that, and I'm doing good the whole time. And I can't see that this can, this can't possibly work out good for me, is all I could think. And, my fears were huge. That's all I could think about for weeks. It consumed my every thought. And the whole time it turned out God was actually working it for my good. I wasn't going to go to jail. I wasn't going to, owe money or lose my license any longer. All I had was 6 months of unsupervised probation. So I went and signed up and never had to go back again and just had to not get in trouble, which I was already doing for 2 years. So, so I just thought that was so crazy. Looking back now, I'm like, that's so funny that God would, freak us out that much to help us, even when we didn't even ask for it. And the next one that I started to think about was, I know a lot of y'all know that I had my tubes tied while I was in addiction, mostly as a punishment to myself because I was making bad decisions and I didn't think I deserved to have a baby. So I even tried to tell them when they were going to tie my tubes to just completely remove the tubes, because apparently they usually would do that now, because it lowers your risk for ever getting ovarian cancer or something like that. So I told them to do that, and they were like, "Are you sure? Are you sure? You're only 28 years old." And I'm like, "I'm sure. I don't want any more kids. Just do it." So when I woke up, they couldn't do it because they said I had too much scar tissue from my C-sections. So I now know that God just wasn't going to let them do that because I needed to have Jonathan. But they're tied back. One and done. But so I got my tubes tied, and God stopped them from removing them. But once me and AJ got married, we, really, he didn't have any kids of his own, and we wanted a baby. We prayed and prayed for it to happen. And just when we were, we pretty much had given up hope. We'd been praying for it for years at this point and didn't think it would ever happen. And then God opened the door, and not in the way that we thought. We thought he was just going to make it happen, but instead, he made me work for it, and he provided the money, made me find a surgeon who could untie them and travel to North Carolina, and 3 months later, I was pregnant. And then, after we got pregnant, we were so excited, we're telling everybody, and I'm like 3 weeks pregnant, or something like that. It was really early. And once we went in to hear the heartbeat at 8 weeks, we were told that there was no heartbeat and that the baby had stopped growing. And this was really hard because my mind immediately went to, how could God let this happen? Why would he open all these doors just for us to lose the baby? I tried not to question God, but it hurt. And I knew it wasn't really God that took the baby from us, but it still hurt. And but now I know it's because I couldn't live without Jonathan. He's perfect. And the next month, I was already pregnant again with him. So, yeah, I know I couldn't live without him. I wouldn't trade him for anything. And just has to help me remember that God always has a plan, even if we don't understand it at that time. So then I have a bunch more, but I have 2 more that I wrote down, but I obviously have a bunch more I didn't write down, or we'd be here all night. But these are all just, my testimonies of what miracles I feel like God has done in my life. That just remind me of how big he really is. So after becoming pregnant, I planned, my plans were I was working from home. I was gonna watch Jonathan myself, work from home at this job that wasn't that great. And that was my plan, and God had other plans. So here I am, I work from home. I'm 7 months pregnant. I'm at the same job that I've been at since I got clean and sober. And I plan to stay there pretty much forever, even though they didn't pay that good and I didn't have enough hours and no benefits. I liked being able to work from home and the freedom that it gave me. So one day my boss, calls and was like, "I need to come to your house and talk to you." And I'm like, our office is an hour away from my house. Why is he coming all the way here to talk to me? And so I'm like, this cannot be good. So he does, and he comes and tells us that he comes to all 3 of our houses that work from home and tells us that our position is no longer a position anymore. It's being done away with, so we had the option to take a new position if we wanted, which for me meant driving an hour each way, working more hours for commission only, and doing a manager's job for most likely less money. So I wasn't going to do that, so I quit. Actually, I was going to try it, and then I found another job that wasn't any good either. No, it's not a promotion. No, actually, whenever I asked him, if we ever got raises or promotions, he's like, "Oh, I'm hiring somebody to come in and we're gonna get all that." And then it was like a couple months later, he's like, "Oh, I owe them a bunch of money now, and now I'm going to cut your hours and take away your bonuses. So, but anyway, so I quit, and then I moved around to a couple different jobs in a couple weeks because they were all awful. And I'm really beginning to freak out at this point because I'm 7 months pregnant and I don't have a job, and I can't afford to not have a job. And now I don't think anybody's going to hire me because I can't even hide the fact that I'm pregnant anymore. So again, I began to question God. And I'm like, God, how can you let this happen to me? How can you let me lose my job while I'm pregnant? I'm freaking out after, I've been at this same job for 4 years. And then I started a couple jobs. They didn't work out. One was only going to give me like part-time hours after I started, and I had to like lift older people and stuff. And I'm like, I can't lift. I'm 7 months pregnant. And then another one was just really awful. The cell phone place. Just really awful. They had metal detectors and would make you take your bra off to go in, and I walked out. Yeah. So that one I walked out of, and then people, God kept trying to tell, or have someone tell me. It was actually Nate kept telling me, "Hey, you should try to apply at this place. It's called Amatrol. You should apply at this." He said it like 4 different times before I finally was like. Shahana was switching jobs, and she's like, God used people at church to tell me, and I'm like, what's God been telling me? Who's been telling me what? And I'm like, well, this is the only place that keeps popping up, and I've heard it like 4 times. So I get on Indeed, and I'm like, mechanical job, like they were hiring for mechanical and engineer, and I'm like, I don't know what any of this stuff is. And then there was one that was like a sales specialist, or what's what I am now. So I'm like, okay, I'll apply for that, because I'm thinking, oh, it's just a factory. I don't really want to work in a factory, but I'll do whatever God told me to do. So I applied, and it turns out it's actually an office job that at first I hated because it was really hard to learn everything. And honestly, I didn't think that if somebody would have sat down and tried to tell me, this is what you're going to be doing, I probably would have ran away, because I wouldn't think that I'm smart enough or capable to do that much in my own strength. But now I've been there it'll be a year next month. And yep, I finally feel like I sort of know what I'm doing most of the time. So a year next month. Yeah, and it turns out this job is a lot better for us financially. Because God had a plan, obviously, and He knew I couldn't afford to keep working at the other place, making way less money. And at the time, I couldn't understand it, but there's no way that we could have made it on what I was making before. And now I also get paid time off, vacations, which I've had to use all of for kids being sick and stuff. But at my other job, I wouldn't have had that, so I would have just lost money if I couldn't work. So God knew that what I needed, and again, He wasn't scared to uproot my whole life and completely freak me out to make it happen if it was going to make things better for me in the long run. And the last one I wrote about was AJ's, all his heart stuff that just happened. Most of y'all know that he, a couple months ago, started having some issues with his heart where it ended up being out of rhythm. And again, I'm questioning God. Why would you give us a baby? And then now he has heart problems, and I'm going to be a single mom, and, everything just seems really bad. I'm thinking the worst, but the whole time I'm like, it's fine, you're fine, nothing, it's fine. I'm the queen of denial sometimes. And so I didn't want him to be freaked out that I was freaked out, so I acted like I wasn't. Oh. But whenever God even orchestrated, every moment up to him finding out he had this heart problem, because him and Natalia had been going to the gym for months. Every Thursday when he picked her up from school, they'd go to the gym, work out. And on this particular Thursday, they had just gotten on the treadmill, and Natalia happened to look over and saw his heart rate was 195. And they just got there. And so she messages me. and tells on him. Because, he's fine even when he's not fine if you ask him. So he would have just said he was fine. So we made him go to the hospital, and they found out he was an AFib. And, for the whole past 3 months, he really wasn't himself. He would wake up being more tired than he went to sleep because his heart was racing all night. They said he could have, had a stroke at any time because his heart rate was so fast. So then they scheduled him for I forgot the name of it, where they shock your heart and a cardio version. And that didn't work. They shocked his heart 3 times. And they said it didn't even go back into rhythm for 1 beat. So here I am, still freaking out. And it's been, at that time, it'd been like over a month or something. But I did try to keep trusting God, even though I knew things looked scary and they didn't look good. And during that procedure, when AJ was put to sleep, God talked to him and told him that he had Christ heart. So finally, after months and months of tests and doctor's appointments, we finally settled on that he was going to have an ablation where they go in and burn your heart and burn certain parts so the electrical signals can't pass through that are bad. Apparently, he needed a heart electrician, is what they called it. So, but that was last Monday, and now his heart's been back in rhythm since, and everything's good. He's feeling back to himself, I think. And I don't know, I felt like that was a miracle for us because and it wasn't really that long of a period of time, but at the time it felt like it was forever, and that time was just, creeping by, and I was trying to do everything that I could extra for him besides work on the cars because I can't do that. And it just felt hard. But praise God, he's healed now, and amen. And so looking back at all these moments, they felt huge at the time that they were happening, but then as time passes, it's like they get smaller in your mind until you actually, go back and focus on them, which is why I'm starting to write everything down so I can go back and read it later. And then I started thinking, well, why does my mind always put God in a box? Like, he can only do this, even though that he's shown me over and over again that he still does do miracles every day. Ephesians 3:20 says, "Now all glory to God, who is able, through his mighty power at work within us, to accomplish infinitely more than we might ask or think." And Jeremiah 32:27 says, "I am the Lord, the God of all peoples of the world. Is anything too hard for me?" Which I think was in AJ's devotional. So I think it's important that we have to remember that God is bigger than our addiction. Our past does not define what he can do with our future. God's bigger than our circumstances. Relapse, consequences, broken relationships, financial problems, and fear doesn't make him any smaller. God is bigger than our shame. Recovery gives us an opportunity to receive grace rather than to remain trapped in guilt. God's bigger than our understanding. He's a lot bigger than my understanding. We may not know how everything will work out, but we can learn to trust him one day at a time. God's bigger than our fear of the future. We don't have to have the whole road mapped out just to take the right next step, or the next right step, or to do the next right thing. God can restore what we thought was beyond repair, because recovery itself can be a testimony that our story isn't finished. And it's important that if we have a testimony, that we need to share it with other people to help lift them up also. We don't have to feel confident every moment to have faith. Sometimes faith is simply choosing to believe that God is bigger even while you're still scared. And I've got Matthew 7:7-8. "Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives. The one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks, the door will be opened." So we have to ask, and he'll give it to us in his timing when it's the right timing. That's the hard part for me, is waiting. So I challenge us all today to take another step, to trust him another day, to surrender another burden to him, and believe that God is still working even when we can't see it. That's all I have. Oh, wow. Do we have anything?
Oh, yes.